Welcome everyone to our discussion today. In the last video that we did, we spoke about the need for people in the diaspora to invest in Zimbabwe. We know that a number of them have been scammed by dubious contractors who are selling illegal stands in Harare and Bulawayo and in other major cities. We also know that most people are moving into rural areas. We've seen in areas like Bulilima, Cholocho, and elsewhere, where people are building nice homes. They are putting solar panels, they are drilling boreholes. We've seen people watering their gardens in the village using borehole water. But at the center of it is the whole question of title deeds. So we are joined by Mr. Rejoice Ngwenya. He is the Director of Coalition for Market and Liberal Solutions, Komaliso. He has been very vocal in talking about rural people being given title deeds. You will know that the rural plots or homesteads have been passed from one generation to the other. My own family home has been passed to us from around 1940 when we resettled where we are currently up to this generation, and we expect to leave this to our own generation. And the question at the center is, do you have to give title deeds to rural families, or you let it belong to what is called communal lands, where you do not even sell your homestead? Because if you want to move to a village, if you are not from that area, you are not allowed to sell. You only speak to the chief. They will decide whether to resettle you or not. But Mr. Rejoice Ngwenya, this is what he does. He has a lot to tell us. Welcome, Mr. Ngwenya. Maybe if you can start by introducing what you do, your organization, and then we discuss your proposal on the title deeds for rural communities.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mabena. As you mentioned that my name is Rejoice Ngwenya. I and a small team, we run an institution called Komaliso, which basically is a think tank that focuses on advocacy around issues of property rights. So it is a calling and a commitment, because we realize that one of the most important elements of development, especially in Africa, is that of property ownership. Because without property, one's collateral network is generally affected. And what really inspires us really, Mabuto, is the importance of the average or the poor person getting into the value chain of wealth creation that revolves around ownership of land, not control of land. And that really preoccupies us. And for now, I think that will do for the introduction. I mean, we've been researching on property rights and title deeds and tenure for about 10 years. And we believe that we have substantial knowledge about how impactful, what impact of property rights have in an economy. And this is our mission.
Please, Mr. Ngwenya, take us through this research, because our focus is into communal lands. As I've said, that these plots are passed from one generation to the other, and currently people do not hold the title deeds to the homesteads. Maybe take us through your research. What did you find when you were engaging rural communities?
Well, one thing, let's set a foundation, a very firm foundation, that there is no development without ownership. And we are constantly being told by statisticians that 60% of Zimbabweans, Mabuto, live in rural areas. Now, if 60% of Zimbabweans live in rural areas, and when we're talking about poverty, we generally talking about rural poverty. We then ask ourselves, why is it that the rural community is poor? What is it that we can find out? And on our minds, then we then believe that perhaps the issue of ownership of property was key in driving the wealth matrix of rural people. So what we do, we then get into rural areas, asking basic questions, Ngabuto, whether or not the rural area citizens understand the importance of ownership and title. Why? Because we know that developed countries have a strong affinity with the collateral that can be used to drive the wealth of citizens. So we then dispatch ourselves into rural areas and we ask them basic questions. Do you own this land? Yes, I own this land. And here in Maputo, we're not just talking about one area, probably from Mutare to Esigodini. If you own this area, this piece of land, what proof do you have that you own this piece of land? And obviously, 80% or 90% of our respondents will not be able to produce any proof of ownership. And that to me becomes a crisis, because if you own something and you can't prove ownership, then you're obviously subject to another force. Then it turns out to be that, most of things that they call ownership in rural areas revolve around so-called authority from a village head or from a chief, which goes back again to our laws, that the rural land is owned by government, but the chiefs and headmen are proxy, owners of the land. So then we then say, do you understand what title deeds are? And of course, many Zimbabweans that live in rural areas have had a brush or two with, urban tenure. So they do understand what title deeds are. But the next thing, of course, the question then is, would you then want to have title deeds in this, area? Because you know what title deeds mean to you. And the answer will obviously be, I would like to have title deeds, but I cannot do that. I cannot have title deeds because the land is owned by the chief. So, Ngabuto, our research then, exposes a very crude aspect that, 60 or so % of our land has no value, because value in property comes from marketability and exchange. So if I can't exchange a piece of land for money, then it's totally valueless. Never mind the issue about productivity. Productivity changes from one village to another. For instance, mostly in Mashona land, productivity is crop-based. But when you swing over to Matebele land, productivity is animal-based, goats and cattle. So our research then showed that the reason why the rural person cannot have title deeds, it's not because they can't apply for title deeds or they don't want to, like in urban centers, but the law does not allow them because the land is owned by the state and the chiefs and headmen are proxies. So which means that the rural land has no market value. If a person wants to dispose of their piece of land, they cannot do that without going to the headman. So it has no value. So rural land, therefore, cannot be used as collateral to develop rural areas, except, of course, in places like peri-urban centers and cross points. So in principle, but there's good news about Matebele land. We'll get to that when you ask the relevant question.
No, I'm certainly asking the relevant question because let's draw lessons from city centers, from cities. I've tried to check on internet in terms of the houses that have been repossessed in cities like Bulawayo and Harare. I've not been lucky. I know here in Johannesburg that people even sell through auction houses for a song that have been repossessed. And this has created families to be homeless because they will have lost their houses. What then does this mean? Because if I lose my job in the city, I go to the rural area. Now, if I have a title deed, I have a debt to settle and I can't settle the debt, and my home, because now it has a market value, it can be sold and we become homeless. That's the other argument that has been raised. So do you have some kind of statistics in terms of, say, since 1980, in terms of people losing their homes, which are then sold on auction in cities?
Well, look, this is very interesting because one thing that most enlightened rural citizens mentioned, including the headmen that we talked to, most of them were saying that the most dangerous thing about having title deeds in rural areas is that that exchange value can attract villagers to the option of selling their land. And most buyers of that land will not only be speculators, but mostly from the cities. Now, the point really is simple here. The ownership, the title deed that is associated with your piece of land, it is same sort of tenure in inverted marks that is associated with your mola or with your 25 head of cattle. In other words, if your cattle are registered with local authorities and you are given UPAO and so forth, it means that that stock becomes an asset. Right? So, and that asset can be used, can be liquidated at your convenience. In other words, the ownership, the possession of a title deed gives you an option to liquidate your property at your own convenience, to use the resources that you get at your own convenience. So it does not make sense to say that because 30 or so % of urbanites have lost their land because their houses, because they submitted themselves to mortgage laws and collateral. In rural areas, people are going to lose that land because they have title deeds. We are not too worried much in our analysis about what you do when you cannot pay back a loan. Our interest is that if you have a title deed, if you are a responsible citizen, you can use your title deed to enhance your economic status by using it as collateral to expand your farming operations, to send your children to school, to buy your assets. That is the reason why the economic benefits of title deeds far outweigh the dangers of disposability to pay back debts. Another thing, Mabuto, is that the reason most people were a bit reluctant to venture into the trajectory of title ownership because of that fear, which is driven by politicians. They know that if you are economically independent, and we know that most African countries, including Zimbabwe, political capital usually emanates from rural areas. Now, once somebody is independent and they got their own title, they don't need to get a handout from public officials. They are independent. They can use that independence to make independent political decisions, and the dependency variable is minimized. And politicians, traditional chiefs that are partisan, do not like that sort of situation. So they know that if you own a piece of land, and I'm telling you, in terms of my personal experience encounters, even at corporate level, during our Constitutional Commission research, talking to intellectuals like Fortune Charumbira, they understand the importance of property ownership. And the more the rural resident is equipped for economic independence, the less likely Mabutu are going to influence their political decisions. So that's, to me, fighting against the title deeds in rural areas by politicians is mostly based on their fear of independence. So the statistics you are talking about, continue.
The issue is our rural homes were designed by the colonial regime as a place for raising the next labor force, and also a place to retire for the old. Those that were now reached the edge of economic activity, they will go to the mines, they will go to the farms, they will go to the cities to work. So there was no historically no kind of economic activity in rural communities. Hence that my father has worked at Dunlop, now retires, they go to the village. I replaced them at Dunlop. So there was no reason for having these title deeds to an extent that one then follows your argument for economic activity in rural areas. What has changed in the last 10 years? I know you spoke about the 60% of people that live in the rural areas, which is what we are always told. But what has changed in terms of economic activity in rural areas, which then require for me to have title deeds to my family fields, which we have, other than the diaspora that is now building modern homes in rural areas?
Well, I mean, just to make it a point that, for instance, make a very strong point that the diaspora that is investing in 500,000 rand housing in Cholocho is a wasted resource without title deeds, and I can explain that. But I want to make a slight correction there, Mabuto. The rural areas have always been productive. You know, if you track the productivity trends of maize, tobacco, even prior to independence, you'll find that a high percentage of grain that was delivered to GMB and a high percentage of cotton that was delivered to the Cotton Marketing Board emanated from rural farmers. And you can flip the coin and talk about cold storage commission and the marketplaces that were set up in rural areas too. So I'm not sure whether it is very correct to say the rural areas were designed only as a place of rest and internment during burials. There was and there continues to be a lot of productivity and production in the rural areas, and there are a lot of facts to support that. But you make a point. What has changed? Let's say the question should be what keeps changing. We know that there was a lot of rural to urban migration during the time of the liberation, or that was between 75 and 79. Why? Because there was so much war, and we started creating places like Ndumbane and airports and so forth, because rural people were running away from, and that actually impoverished them because there was less productivity at airports than in the rural areas. But the independence government began to talk about urbanization of rural areas. This is why the term growth point came into place, because the government then wanted to reduce the rural to urban migration by creating inactive economic points in different rural areas, Mapisa, and so forth, Cha-Cha-Cha, there were so many places, Che-Che-Che. So the idea then, Mabuto, was to start reinventing the rural area as an area of higher productivity, but through some kind of peri-urbanization. This is why there was a sudden growth of growth points within that decade between 1980 and 1990. And a lot of money was poured, but the issue of tenure was not debated well. This is why you found that even up to now, there began some kind of regression in terms of investments that went into growth points, because those business people in the growth points could not even use their properties, their double-story, supermarkets and grinding mills as collateral. But that is beginning to change now. So there is a move towards peri-urbanization. If you go to Lupane, even putting universities, Nabuto, in rural outposts like Lupane is a way of redefining the economic trajectory towards. So why would I have a double-story house 5 kilometers from Lupane State University if I have not had this? It is a waste of money, because if the village head doesn't like me for political reason, I can get kicked out, without any recourse. So these are the dangers of investing in rural areas in property without equity. However, so the government is beginning to realize the importance of urbanization in rural areas by creating these these academic outposts like Lupane State University, hoping that the areas around, like Goromonzi, for instance, is being urbanized now, and it should be a rural area. Why? Because we all understand the importance of title deeds as a weapon of economic upliftment, Mabuto.
But we have seen, I was talking to our commissar in respect to the land question in the UK, to say You have the economic active in London. When they are old, they move to plots outside London, which are much cheaper as compared to the property that you buy in London. But again, it is not easy for everyone because of the high cost of buying land in that part of the world, to an extent that some people become kind of homeless, so to speak. You have retired from Harare, you are going back to Lower Gweru. Your brother says, the title deed is in my name. People start fighting over, as we have seen, people fighting over inheritance. We have seen some houses in the city being sold by one family member because it has market value. How then do we guard against all this when it comes to rural areas? Because everyone believes that a rural home is for every family member.
That's very true. It's a tragedy, really, that sometimes the confusion of tenure then it begins to be abused in terms of disposability. But let's bear in mind that a title deed in Mabuto is specific, ownership, boundaries. It's written in somebody's name. So if it is a rural community, right? I'll tell you that, for instance, we have a very big communal stand in Shurugwe as a family. So we can use that expertise in creating a family trust, because if a communal stand belongs to a family, the title can come under a family trust. So the same principles that we are, for instance, advocating in our new Right to Shelter Act are about title deeds. Mabuto is about security. So if there are any variables that make you insecure, then it means that the law has to be corrected. So my point really is that when you get disputes in town where siblings fight over property ownership, it's because there is a variable that has not been, manipulated correctly. So when it is a village home, Mabuto is a family property. It does not belong to any individual. But the point is that even a family trust can be able to register that home in a family trust name, so that everybody can benefit from the economic value used to improve the quality of the home, sink balls, develop poultry project and so forth. It's a bit different from the diaspora normally come into Chorocho, are given a piece of land by the chief and or the headman, and they develop a fantastic property. It still applies to the same thing. The laws apply. If you have that fantastic property in Lupane, we are saying it is better for you to get a title deed, so that you are able to enhance your pension, liquidity. Because if you own it, you are not supposed to be afraid of its disposability, because it is your property. But when there is a dispute, of course, the laws of the land can come in. So even if I lose a job in fact, if I lose a job in a city and I revert back to my rural home in Shurugwe, and that home is a title deed, I can simply catch a bus or drive to Gweru, to a finance house, and say, look, I want to enhance my business project and get my money. So it doesn't look. I think the challenge that you have, Mabena, which is understandable, like most of our reluctant respondents in rural areas, is that they look at the disposability of a property from a negative point. That if I lose this property, or if irresponsible villagers start selling off their property to ravenous and predatory city buyers, they will end up with no property. No, they will not they will end up with no property, but they will end up with money in their bank account, so they can use that money to enhance their or even buy another property elsewhere. So I don't understand the fear of transferability on the basis of fear of loss of property. If it's your title deed, if you decided to sell it off at a storm because you want some quick money, then that is the risk. You are a communist and I'm a capitalist, and in capitalism you have to accept a risk that comes the demand of your product. So if you undervalue your property and you get peanuts, then you have to accept the responsibility. But our moral argument, Nabuto, is that if you have a title deed, you have a right to do what you want to do with that title deed. You can either enhance your wealth by getting a loan, or you can dispose of it and move to another village.
Then there's this question. I've been interacting with some in Matebele land. You know, the issue of marginalization. People saying what they call outsiders have invaded Bulawayo, taking over properties. You then place a market value to a property in Ngai, in a rural village in Ngai. The fear some is that those with money will then come and occupy the entire Ngai and drive out the local people in Ngai. Have you come across such arguments from your side as you continue to do this work?
In fact, it's absolutely correct, because I remember when we were doing our research in Tabazinduna, you know, Tabazinduna is one of the few places, rural areas, where there is an enclave that is title deeds. I think there was an arrangement with Mr. John Roads. I'm not sure. I was going to check that with Patisanya, but and of course one or two researchers, but I never had that much time. But I spent about 2 hours talking to chiefs in Tabazinduna, and it turned out to be that there is a part of Tabazinduna that actually has got title deeds. It was an arrangement. They worked with Cecil John Roads, and you can imagine that there is that communal bond that is already there in that village. But my understanding is that Zimbabwe is for Zimbabweans. So if a person in Chipinge, in Checheche, a rural area, has a title deed, and my family loves that mountainous space, I have a constitutional right. There is no need for this tribal monopoly over areas, because it defeats the purpose of a united country. You know, I know that there are different political parties that always talk about these kind of things. That no, you know, Nabuto, actually the going line was that if we here in Matebeleland open this space up put it in the market, you are going to get people from Rewa coming to buy stands here and building houses. And before we know it, we have been overwhelmed by people from Rewa and Shona. I was saying to them, look, the minute that you put a tribal prism on the development trajectory, then you lose you lose it. Zimbabwe is for everybody. If I am coming from Nyanga and I want to buy a plot at Dombodema, why you should allow me to do that? Because we have the title deeds, the tenure system that we are talking about, Mabuto, opens up the whole country to be a whole marketplace for exchange. So we heard about that, but we did not use we did not use the tribal prism in the interpretation. You can fear all you want, but if the tenure system has changed, if a person who owns a stand, at Escotini, wants to sell that piece of land to somebody who comes from Murewa, that is their choice. The Constitution says you have a freedom of movement and assembly. We are not going to, in terms of discussing our development trajectory at Komaliso, we do not use those kind of tribal prism, and we actually admonish the respondents who push us into that enclave of tribal, antagonism. That is not development. It's very regressive, Mabuto.
We are running out of time. My last question to you, your advice to the diaspora. We see these women, Kogi, they are buying land in Bulawayo, they are building properties. Your advice to them in terms of venturing also in rural communities, to build in rural communities as they are doing, and also to the diaspora that are building these beautiful homes. And you know that now they are saying the future is rural. So what's your advice to them?
Absolutely. If they can just turn around and see what's happening in Botswana, Mabuto, they are going to discover that they are actually igniting the urbanization trajectory in the rural areas. We really want to thank them for investing in rural areas, Choloche and Lupane and Tomotima, because it's going to speed up the legislative transformation process. So when I submit a petition for title deeds to be issued in rural areas, I will be using those examples of how Zimbabweans outside the country are investing in rural areas and the need for the country's laws to protect their tenure so that they become immunized from political intimidation by chiefs and village men who don't understand that development is pegged around the issue of property title that is registered.
Right, just in a minute, you wrote on your Facebook page that you are waiting for a call to address the portfolio committee from the Speaker of Parliament. How far are you?
That's a good question. The last session of Parliament is starting on Tuesday next week, and I've talked to a number of members of Parliament across the political divides. We have promised to push for the acknowledgement of that petition, and once it is acknowledged, then it is up to the Speaker of Parliament to put it on the agenda. And so far, we are then waiting for Tuesday or the week after for the Speaker of Parliament to decide whether or not that petition we have submitted is worthy of attention. And I'm glad that several members of Parliament have promised to push that motion so that we immediately begin talking about the transformation of Zimbabwe and putting it back into the international league of property ownership.
Thank you so much, my brother, Mr. Rejoice Ngwenya, the director of Coalition for Market and Liberal Solutions, Comaliso. We will continue to have this discussion. Mr. Ngwenya work together in the movement for democratic change. He's a liberal, I'm a communist, but we did work together in developing the policies in the movement for democratic change. You might have questions to ask Mr. Ngwenya if you are investing in rural communities in terms of the title deeds. He will drop his number. What's your number if they want to contact you?
Easy. My WhatsApp number is obviously +263 for those that are outside the country, +263 772 256 326.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ngwenya. Please share your views in the comment section. Let's continue with the discussion. Please circulate this video. We will invite again Mr. Ngwenya to further discuss these issues based on the comments that you have posted. Please like this YouTube channel, subscribe. Otherwise, thank you so much, Mr. Ngwenya is in Harare. Enjoy your stay in Harare. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Appreciate it.
Thank you.